Hello and welcome to the 48th episode of the Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Dave, and Gio may or may not be joining us at sometime during the broadcast. Today we are continuing the summer of snips with more discussions of Ahsoka. Last time we talked about more of the younger Ahsoka, Clone Wars era, and now we're going to segue into older Ahsoka and also a revisitation of the World Between Worlds, or no, excuse me, Mortis. Close enough, because I'm pretty sure there's a correlation there anyway. Actually, there is a correlation because we've seen the owl on the symbol of the sister of Mortis on some of the portals inside the world.
It's down there at the bottom.
There's right there at the bottom, right to the gate. So, Dave, how would you like to kick off this?
Well, like you said before, is if you want to know, like if you're coming into this and this is the first time you've seen our coverage of Summer of Snips, go back and watch last episode. Watch 47. And we talk about like the beginnings of Ahsoka is where she pops on the scene during the Clone Wars movie. She of course was like a joint creation of Dave Filoni and George Lucas. You know, she's a character that was created for a number of reasons and has done a lot of things and has gotten a lot of evolution over her arc so far. And we started talking about, you know, teeny bopper, tube top, short skirt Ahsoka, and you know, we delved a lot into that. But we're at the point where the Clone Wars is kind of ending. The Clone Wars is over. It's about like Order 66. The last season of the Clone Wars was intense. And intense for Ahsoka, because I mean, do you agree that the last season of Clone Wars was almost entirely Ahsoka centric?
Yeah, eight episodes or so were. So that was a bit upsetting because it's like, of course, Dave is going to prioritize that character over all the other cool storylines that he could have finished for Clone Wars. Because especially the one I thought was a bit muted was the one that picks up immediately after she leaves the Jedi Temple, where she basically becomes a drug runner and gets involved in underworld gangster stuff within the first day of leaving, which some people thought was funny. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of funny. But she's trying to help these two sisters who kind of lost faith in the Jedi because of the war, which is, again, reiterating the whole reason why the Force has apparently allowed all this to happen in the first place. But then we get finally to the Siege of Mandalore, where, you know, Ahsoka makes a direct appeal to Anakin and Obi-Wan to come, and they would have it and not been for Palpatine getting kidnapped. So having Maul come back and try and bribe her into, hey, this is what this is all about. This is the end game now. You could come with me and we could put a stop to it. But she doesn't want to believe it, because every time the Jedi in the prequel era get a hint as to what's actually going on, they don't want to believe it.
Now, see, that's one thing I think we should delve into at some point on the show, is the arc of Darth Maul. Because the Darth Maul arc gets deep, and it gets deep into like the mysticism. You know, on the surface, it's like, oh, they cut the dude in half, he fell down a shaft, and you brought him back?
Yeah.
But there's more than that. And there's a lot more to that in Clone Wars and in Rebels. There's just a ton, and a little bit alluded to in Solo. If we ever see Solo 2, I would be very interested to see what we get of Maul in that. But I think that'll be a cool one on there. But yeah, Maul plays an effect in Ahsoka's arc, because at this point, Ahsoka she's come back. She's in Star Wars Rebels, and well, even before that, she's in the end of the Clone Wars. A lot of Clone Wars really tell the saga of the Skywalkers and the wars, but we're using Ahsoka. We talked about this last time, to be that kid, to be the one that, oh, that's me. Oh, I can identify as that person. She's supposed to be the audience that it was allegedly written for, because this was not an adult cartoon. This aired on, what was it? Was it Disney XD? or was this Nickelodeon?
Disney XD.
Disney XD. So, you know, it's that person, and she did grow up and she evolved. We're seeing over there the picture on the other side is probably about season 3-ish Ahsoka.
Yeah, because of the outfit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably about season 3. So she's evolving. We see how she's gotten to where she can take on um like an entire ship full of clones, and Anakin has prepared her successfully to survive that. And the trauma that she gets, and Order 66, and skip ahead, boom, fulcrum. Ahsoka is talk about that.
Right. So the fulcrum thing, admittedly, there's a lot of big gaps in the story because it's like, how does she go from where we see her at the end of Clone Wars to suddenly being fulcrum, which is like the secret assistant in the Rebel Alliance that nobody really knows about yet, who's gonna very much on a need to know basis. And I'm like, I was kind of wondering. I kind of assumed it was going to be Ahsoka because I thought, well, who else is it going to be? Since most of the other Jedi at that point in the story were either killed by Order 66 because they hadn't started retconning everything yet. Mm-hmm. And so I figured, oh, it'll probably be Ahsoka, and that was cool. I liked adult Ahsoka a lot more. She seemed like a much more mature, well-rounded character. I've only seen those early seasons like once, but I recall she didn't have too much screen time. But when we got to the end of season 2, and they finally went to Malachor to try and activate this Sith weapon with Maul, and you got to see the showdown with Vader, and that seemed to be where she finally realized who he was, and he in turn realized who she was. And initially, I remember it ended on what was a frustrating type cliffhanger because they don't show you what happened. You just see Vader marching away, looking kind of angry or indignant. And I admit the solution they came up with to reveal what happened is extremely unique. And it's still, whether or not it bears fruit, we'll see. I believe it'll come back, The World Between Worlds, in the Ahsoka series, and hopefully have a bearing on something. But even as Fulcrum, she seemed the way she would present herself as something ethereal, something different. Kind of like, as we know from the Mortis arc, she has the spirit of the sister, the light side within her now. So, which also begs the question that when you hear her voice in The Rise of Skywalker, it's like, well, conventional wisdom says that all the Jedi voices who communicate with Rey have already died. But if she has the spirit of the sister within her, is she on Mortis? Is she communicating? Did her spirit get transferred there after she died physically? Like, what's going on there? We're not really sure. So there's still plenty of interesting gaps in that story to explore. And I'm curious as to whether or not the Ahsoka series, or at least the first, I don't know if they're going to do multiple seasons or not, but if that's going to explore that more deeply, or if that's going to stick to more of just plot revolving Thrawn or not.
See, that's the things, and that's what this whole Summer of Snips is about, is what are we going to see? There's so much we could see. What are they going to show us? I mean, believe the internet if you will. Hey, we're on the internet, so believe us or don't. But Dave Filoni has allegedly said that this is just the next season 5 of Star Wars Rebels. Okay, and if you want to know more of exactly what happens, we're going to hit the points of Ahsoka in Star Wars Rebels. But if you want to watch that in detail, go watch Rebels Revisited on Monday with Mark Von Olen and Ashley Brienzo. They go into much, much, much more detail about specifically what happens during Star Wars Rebels. And they'll analyze that. And if you want to see even more detail on Ahsoka from the female point of view, there's going to be an episode in a couple of weeks before the Ahsoka series airs of Daughters of the Galaxy that it was going to focus on Ahsoka Tano completely. So go check out those other shows. But yeah, I mean, she comes in as Fulcrum and we don't know. This is how Star Wars does, is they'll skip around and then there's gaps that you can come back and you can fill in later. And maybe Ahsoka show is going to flash back and show us some of that. Maybe it's going to go and be Mando time period only. Maybe a lot of the Mandoverse has kind of been filling in a lot of the holes between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens and the sequel trilogy. is they've been really, really, really harping on kind of the cloning aspect, which was, don't even get me started on the sequel trilogy, the cloning aspect of somehow Palpatine returned. But there is a lot of that can be filled in, and I think we're going to see some of that in the Ahsoka series, and I think we'll get a culmination of that, I think, probably in the Dave Filoni movie.
Well, my prediction as to where the Ahsoka character is going to end up at the end of the series is she's going to end up on Mortis as the sister, and that's where it's going to end. And how long he takes to get to tell that story, we don't know, because obviously you can have a character die in Star Wars at some point and they just tell stories from their past, an infinitum, you know. So I think that's probably where she's going to end up. And the fact that the first logo put out for the show was copying the graphics of the World Between Worlds suggested that's where there as well. And it's like, is the idea that she's not going to be able to find Thrawn and she's going to use the World Between Worlds to go back to the end of Rebels to save Ezra or kill Thrawn that way? Like, we don't know. You know, we'll see.
So let's back up a second, because I know, like we talked about last week, that, you know, this is the summer of snips, and people are going like, what? What are you talking about? Snips? I thought you were talking about Ahsoka. Just as we explain why Ahsoka is called Snips, go ahead and go back to the beginning and explain to the casual viewer, the people who may not have seen the animation, who are just getting into this to prepare for the Ahsoka show, what is Mortis? What is the World Between Worlds?
So there was a 3-episode arc in season 3 in which Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan are on a ship, and they're tracking this distress beacon from a Jedi ship that's an ancient distress beacon. And they disappear off the radar for what Captain Rex determines was only a second. But for them, they apparently disappear from the space-time continuum and get sucked into this diamond-shaped spacecraft, which transports them to this world called Mortis, where the daytime, everything is beautiful and high-key lighting everywhere, and it's gorgeous and paradise, and represented by the daughter you see down in the graphic there with the owl on her shoulder. And she represents the light side of the Force. And then at nightfall, everything gets dark and dead and evil and lava and all that, which represents her brother, the sun, who's the dark side of the Force. You see on the opposite side of the mural there. And to keep the balance between them in a temple on Mortis is the father, the guy in the middle there. And he's trying to keep the balance of the Force between the siblings. And it's like a metaphysical representation of the Jedi philosophy of keeping balance and what that means. And we see that balance is not mathematical in terms of an equal amount of Jedi or Sith, but it's referring to the fact that the good side of people, like the light side, is not trying to disrupt the balance. They're not trying to use their powers to do unnatural things. Whereas the brother is, you know, all evil as the dark side. He's constantly trying to use his powers to escape Mortis and wreak havoc on the galaxy, which is what would disrupt the balance. Basically confirming for people that no, balance was not achieved at the end of Revenge of the Sith, because back then when that movie came out, you didn't have Clone Wars or anything. So there were literally just 2 Sith, Vader and Palpatine, and 2 Jedi in Yoda and Obi-Wan. It's like, no, that's not balance. This is more balance. Mortis is balance. Balance is the light side and the father trying to maintain stability, and the dark side's always trying to muck things up. And the father seems to think that Anakin is somebody special, or at least his children pick up on that first. The brother especially wants to show Anakin his future as Darth Vader's as a way to trick him into wanting to escape. He's like, oh, this will happen to you unless you help me escape, and we could set things right and end the war. And, you know, all the things that evil people tell you that they're going to do, and these Faustian deals, which turn out to be false. But the father realizes that because Anakin has been shown all of this, not only was his son right that Anakin is potentially the chosen one, but none of the things that are fated to happen are going to happen now that Anakin is aware of them. So the father purges Anakin's memory of this. Meanwhile, Ahsoka is part of these machinations. The brother, in his attempt to tempt Anakin over to his side, used her as a hostage and nearly killed her. And she had to be resurrected by the sister, who transferred her spirit into Ahsoka, and the sister ended up being accidentally killed by the brother. And Ahsoka, despite having the sister's spirit of the light side now within her, like literally, she didn't have to stay behind there. And the father pled with Anakin, you've got to stay here to keep my children intact. But because at the end of the story, both the sister and the brother are dead, then Anakin reasons he doesn't have to stay there. And the father's like, well, if you don't, everything's going to be disrupted. You can't leave. But Anakin decides to leave anyway, and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka go with him, and they decide that they're not even going to bother trying to tell Yoda about this, or if they did, they don't go into it because it's like, how are we going to even begin to explain this? This is completely insane and crazy. And when they leave, as I mentioned, that as far as Rex was concerned, they were only off the radar for a minute, and wherever the beacon was coming from has now disappeared. And according to Dave Filoni, I still remember this, walking across town for like 2 miles to get to the bus stop and ride the bus 10 miles so I could pick up the season 3 Blu-ray, fully expecting to see a lengthy behind-the-scenes making of the Mortis trilogy and commentaries on it like they usually do for their big arcs on those things. Nada. It was a 2.5-minute segment where Filoni says that there are very specific answers to every question you could possibly have about Mortis. But to answer those questions would defeat the purpose of the Mortis story in the first place. And so I thought that is really telling and very mature of them, and which I'm not being sarcastic, I mean that. And then about 5 or 6 years later, during the climax of Star Wars Rebels Season 4, we find out that the bad guys, the Empire, are engaging in this archaeological find. We're etched into the wall of this cave. We see this mural you see down below there, representing Mortis, and there's a way inside that takes you once again outside the space-time continuum, but not to Mortis, just to this place of eternal darkness where you have these white lines everywhere, almost like the game Asteroids.
It's like Tron.
Basically, it's like Tron, and you see these different portals that can take you anywhere across the events in Star Wars, and you see in the portals images from the live-action movies playing out or from the cartoons playing out, and Ezra Bridger, the protagonist of Rebels, ends up getting to this one portal in particular where he sees Ahsoka about to be killed by Vader on Malachor from the end of Season 2 of Rebels, and he instinctively just reaches through the portal and grabs her and pulls her back in, and Ahsoka initially she doesn't have any idea where she is, but she's smart enough to realize that whatever this is, we can't mess with it. We should. She's like, you shouldn't have pulled me through, but I'm appreciative. But we can't mess with this anymore. We got to get out of here. And Palpatine, meanwhile, since the portal has been opened, attempts to get it, and we realize that that's why the Empire was looking for it. Palpatine is somehow aware of it and wants to get control of the entire space-time continuum. And Ezra and Ahsoka have to team up to stop him, which they succeed in doing. But while we're in the world between worlds, we do see that symbol of the owl, the symbol of the sister, flying around in there. Which again, Ahsoka has her spirit, the spirit of the sister, in there. So now it's following her. And so the question has been lingering since these events, is she still have an extra benefit of being essentially resuscitated with the spirit of the light side? Is that going to mean something? Sort of like Rey at the end of Rise of Skywalker getting Kylo and puts his soul, the soul of the last living Skywalker, into her. So as cheesy as it is, she's like, I'm Rey Skywalker. So, well, technically she is a Skywalker. Whatever that chosen one type of stuff is, she's got it now. But what does that mean for Ahsoka in particular? Because again, we heard her voice at the end of Rise of Skywalker. Like, what does that mean? Is her corporeal body dead and gone, and she's just still out there on more? We don't really know. And so it's again very mysterious. But we know from the logo, for the first logo released for the Ahsoka show, that it's designed to look like the world between worlds. So it's a safe bet we will see that again.
So yeah, we are going to see Mortis. We have seen so much of Mortis, and it's complicated. It is purposely back to kind of, I think it's Dave kind of trying to create his own mythology within Star Wars the way George started out. George started out with the Guardians of the Whills and things being very metaphysical. And there is no accident that there are three. There's a father, a son, and a daughter. There's a trinity of beings.
Well, this was also George's idea, actually, because this was before the Disney sale. Because this came out in 2011, and in the brief 2.5-minute segment they had, he said this was all George, and him talking to us about the Force and lecturing to us about it a lot when he came into these ideas. And now Filoni has simply shepherded it to now. But I forgot to mention that even in Mortis, Obi-Wan has a vision. He sees Qui-Gon telling him to stick to the whole chosen one thing. And because this arc took place in Clone Wars, you haven't had the events of Episode 3 yet, so you don't have something as egregious as the end of the Kenobi series where he sees the spirit of Qui-Gon and doesn't ask him, like, hey, man, what the heck happened?
Where you been? What's going on?
What happened? But that's another question. It's like, well, did he really see Qui-Gon, or was that maybe the son trying to tease him, or was it the daughter doing something? It's like, we don't know. It's just, it's out there.
Yeah, I simplify Mortis in saying that Mortis is what is going to introduce. It's kind of going to introduce kind of Doctor Who time variations into Star Wars, or it could. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But time, it's not linear. It's kind of not even spaghetti that, spoiler alert, the greatest Batman of all time alludes it to be. But it's, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. This can literally make anything in Star Wars happen at any time. They're immediately in Rebels get the moral dilemma of what would Ezra want to do? Oh, I could save Kanan. But if you do,
spoilers again. That's like the Flash says to Bruce Wayne, his Ben Affleck Bruce Wayne. He's like, Bruce, I could fix things. I could not only save my parents, I could save your parents. To which Bruce is like, thank you for the offer. It's very generous, but our scars make us who we are. We can't. You could destroy everything.
Yeah, and I'm not going to spoil the Flash yet. It hadn't been around long enough. But
that begs the question: did Ezra make a mistake by pulling Ahsoka through that portal? Something bad could happen. We don't know.
I mean, that completely could. It could be the aftermath of what has happened there. Ahsoka, in looking for Thrawn herself, could be obsessed enough with it that she could disregard what she said before and re-enter Mortis in the search for Thrawn and Ezra. I would hope not. Well,
that's the thing, is I'm trying to figure out that if this is simply the hunt for Thrawn, and most of it takes place before the epilogue of Rebels, because the epilogue of Rebels wasn't clear about how far into the future that event was when they're looking for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, unless Thrawn is trying to get the world between worlds, which would be a repeat kind of what Palpatine was trying to do in Rebels, it's like, well, it'd be a good tool to use to at least try and get an idea of where they went, maybe. I don't know. So we'll find out.
I think we've seen repeats of plot lines, because you said the Empire is looking and searching for these archaeological rebel records. Where have we ever seen a repeat of the same storyline where the big evil Empire is looking for the mystical artifacts that can help them control? Oh, wait. We just saw episode 5 of that. It's not like the stories don't repeat.
Yes. I admit that would be fun to see with a Star Wars flavor, especially for Thrawn, because he has an appreciation of different cultures, and that's how he beats them.
I mean, if you want to go there and go down, and this is a whole other show. I don't know that this would work for your other show or for this show better. If you want to go down that road, is Thrawn Belloc? He kind of is.
It's true, because Belloc is shown to be a guy who does have a genuine interest in certain artifacts, because his whole motivation was he just wanted to talk to God. He was no Nazi. At least not as much of a Nazi as Walter Donovan was.
Is Snoke Walter Donovan? Is the Emperor Hitler? It's all Lucasfilm. It's all Lucasfilm. I think there are arguments to be made for that.
Well, after all, we saw in Clone Wars in that Ryloth arc that Wat Tambor of the Techno Union is making off with the Ark of the Covenant and loading it onto his ship. And in one of the other seasons, we had one of the senators gets killed because of Jar Jar's stupidity, and he had the Staff of Ra with him. And we see the hieroglyphs of R2 and 3PO inside the Well of the Souls. So apparently it is canon. They're in the same universe, because after all, it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, not a separate continuity.
The Incan, I think it's Incan, fertility idol is on the shelf in Solo.
Right.
I think the Crystal Skull is as well, isn't it? Or something.
I don't think not that one. Dryden Voss had one from a different Han Solo story, from one of the Legends stories, but it wasn't the same as the Akator skull, unless it showed up in maybe Luthen had one like that. I know Luthen had one of the Sankara stones.
Yeah. Absolutely.
His were actually a lot bigger though, but he still had them. So there you go, guys. This crossover means something. Because after all, that's one of the fascinating things about the Indiana Jones franchise is that they validate the religious beliefs of multiple religions, which begs the question: it must come from somewhere, and it comes from Star Wars.
Okay, and if you think we're just absolutely full of crap, you have seen that not this version of the Mortis painting, entrance, whatever, but the epilogue one with the Loth Wolves from Rebels, front center, huge, ginormous photo opportunity at Celebration London. There's gonna be something.
And since the cartoons do count as canon as much as the movies and the live action shows, then that means the 5 Indiana Jones movies and the Indiana Jones Chronicles are canon to the Star Wars universe. So, hey, what do you know? They've made 5 other really good Star Wars movies.
Okay, you said 5. I'm gonna go with 4. I'm gonna go with 4. And that's not to throw any shade on Dial of Destiny. If you have not seen Dial of Destiny, go see Dial of Destiny. I'm throwing shade at Crystal Skull, people.
Lucasfilm would very much appreciate it if you go see Dial of Destiny.
They really would. They would do that.
But then again, that also means that Mads Mikkelsen has a twin across the cosmos, so he must have his twin must have used the world between worlds at some point to jump ahead into a different galaxy in another time period.
or he's a clone,
as well as Han Solo jumping to another time period to be Indiana Jones.
Or again, they're clones. Instead of Luke, it's Luke or Mads.
Yes, people who love legends. That's what you got to remember, guys. Legends sometimes had things like Luke. Let's have a clone. Not a terrible idea, but what's his name? Luke. Really?
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there in the EU that we remember fondly, and it was the only Star Wars content at the time, and we were like, yeah, this is amazing. And we look back at it and we're going like, really? But yeah, as I think we're going to cover on another show later. I think we may cover some more about Grand Admiral Thrawn.
We just see everybody who's watching right now. We just came up with a new episode for Unifying Force. So it'll be the crossovers between Star Wars and Indiana Jones and what that means for the greater lore of Jedi and the Sith versus the lore that we've seen in the 5 Indiana Jones films. There we go.
And again, this is a long time ago in a galaxy far away. It was a long time. How does this affect like Earth history, is because then now Star Wars is history to things that are happening or have happened on Earth. I vote for the Chewbacca is Sasquatch theory. I'm just saying.
Well, yeah, that was actually the subject of a comic strip, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
They have done that. They have, and I don't know if canon and legends gets fuzzy on that. I can't imagine that one's canon still.
Oh no, not that it's canon, but I mean that there was a comic, like I can't remember if it was a comic or if it was a short story or what, but it was a spoof. It was always meant that way, as I recall.
Pretty sure it was a comic because I've seen like skeletonized Han Solo, and then you've got Gone Wild Chewie. Yeah. But anyway, like the world between worlds it introduces huge possibilities, huge things, and then we get to that's the end of Rebels. And we get to this lady right here, boom, where we see Rosario Dawson start in the Mandoverse. Talk a little bit about what we've seen there.
So she first showed up halfway through season 2, and I always forget the character's name, but she's on this planet interrogating this former, basically.
Oh yeah, like Lauren Mary Kim.
Like the CEO or CFO of the main company that built the Star Destroyers and manufactured all of them, and she's cornered her and wants to, where she's ruling her own little fiefdom in this village, which looks a lot like some ancient samurai village kind of, and she wants to know where Thrawn is, and she believes that she has had recent dealings with Thrawn, and she tells Ahsoka something, but we don't get to see what it is because the camera cuts away. They wanted to keep it a mystery.
Yeah.
And then we don't see Ahsoka again until the end of season 2, or no, not the end of season 2, but the Book of Boba Fett, the unofficial season 3 of Mandalorian, or season 2.5, towards the end of it, where Ahsoka is on Luke's planet, which is still unnamed, and she's visited Luke. Apparently, I guess she was there to invite him to go after the hunt for Thrawn, and he declined because he's doing his own thing. And really, it was just there for fan service to say, hey, these two characters met up, even though we didn't get to hear the conversations she had with Luke or why she was there. We could just at best assume that it had something to do with Thrawn.
And stuff that maybe we'll see in Ahsoka. They could fill in that backstory.
Yes. And so she had also cautioned Din Djarin that, you might not want to separate Grogu from Luke because you'll interrupt the training. And she had also said, I can't take Grogu either because earlier in season 2, because, this is your thing and whatnot. And so now we find from the trailers of Ahsoka that she is apparently still on the hunt for Thrawn. And we have characters who are sort of stand-ins for ones from the Heir to the Empire story. They even mentioned the line Heir to the Empire in the story. And frankly, while we're on the subject, I think it's a much better fit for the Heir to the Empire story in the Ahsoka series, because it wouldn't have fit, to me, it wouldn't have fit as a Skywalker saga storyline, because the purpose of the Skywalker family saga as told in the first 6 movies is done with. It's like, you got rid of the corrupt Jedi Order, we got rid of the Sith, done. Everything that happens after that with the Empire is more politics and military stuff, and that's not Skywalker saga specific. Yes, the family still is involved, but it's not really the Force at play anymore for what's really going on, or the Force pulling the strings behind the scenes or anything like that. So I kind of think it'll work better with Ahsoka, because as we see as an adult, it seems like it's just more primed than seeing a bunch of de-aged Star Wars heroes played by other actors running around doing it, which is why I was never hot on the idea of doing that in the first place.
Again, is that done? Is the Skywalker story, is the arc of the Chosen One over? Because it's like, was Anakin the Chosen One? Yeah. Was Luke the Chosen One? Is Ahsoka the Chosen One?
Is the Skywalker bloodline by definition the chosen?
It's
because if you want, like, that great phrase that Star Wars gives us, from a certain point of view, you can imagine that because the Force deemed it necessary to get rid of the Jedi at the expense of the Sith, then it was always in the cards that Palpatine was going to have these contingencies that had to be dealt with, and that was the way the story was going to go all the way to Episode 9. So as cringy as a lot of it is, you could still look at it and say, well, from a certain point of view, the Force is finishing the task of getting rid of the Sith in its entirety. As illogical as Palpatine's separate plans are, one could argue that for real-world parallels, he is as illogical as the Führer, or Hirohito, at the end of World War II, in terms of their discombobulated master plans and insanities. And so, one can look at it that way and say, yeah, it technically still fits.
Yeah, it's like the Force has created, and I really don't like the term Mary Sue, because if you go ahead and look at it, and all the people that are calling Rey a Mary Sue, is like, you go look, and Luke is a Mary Sue too, because he studied martial arts for like 3 weeks, and
and it's like, oh, he got his hand cut off, it was suffering. It's like, but he got a new one, like, in the context of the movie, it was probably like an hour later. That was literally the same. It's like, well, that's not really a consequence then. It's like, but that's another story. But yeah,
but you get all of that, and you can go and you can argue now that because Palpatine returned, by hook, by crook, by whatever, the Sith are back, is the Force has created Rey as a part of that, and she's got to be the balance. She's the dyad in the Force, literally, to Kylo, to overbalance and correct, and this can continue. Like we were talking about before, it's not like they haven't told the same exact story with slightly different characters. I mean, if The Force Awakens isn't A New Hope, I'll eat my hat. It's but we're gonna see how Ahsoka fits into that. They're building this up, and they're building this up across all of the properties. There's a reason, I think, why Luthen is an antiquities dealer in Andor. You know, because we're being told that all of these Mandoverse, Disneyverse, whatever Star Wars shows are going to culminate in the Filoni movie, the Filoni directed movie. So that's his tie over here in Andor. Pull this little bit out, over there, and you're going to take this little section over here of Ahsoka and what's happened in the Clone Wars. We're already seeing that there are all kinds of different Rebels characters that are going to be in the Ahsoka show that we know they're cast. They've been shown. They were introduced at Celebration, and they've talked about it. So all of these pieces and parts, Bo-Katan has had dealings before with Ahsoka on Mandalore and in Rebels. Was Bo and Ahsoka together in Rebels? I don't remember. Again, if you want to know, watch Star Wars Rebels Revisited because they know more than we do about that. But you know, Bo-Katan has really become the focus of the last season of The Mandalorian, so that's an easy tie-in with Ahsoka. They're friends from a long time back in the Siege of Mandalore. So many possibilities and things that we can see from any time period. For crying out loud, they could tell us that what you're suspecting, the voice of Ahsoka giving Rey the advice, could be her whispering through a portal in Mortis. She could literally just be in there and saying that, watching these events unfold.
At the World Between Worlds, just watching it happen and talking. And, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big, huge, gigantic possibilities of the galaxy. So let's get down even though, and I know there's going to be a big prediction show with a lot of us, but preview a little bit of your predictions of what you think. Just give us something. What do you think is one thing we're gonna see?
So I think the first episode is going to provide more context of where exactly she's been since the last time we saw her in Rebels before the original. Like, what was she doing during the events of the original trilogy? What did she go to see Luke for on his planet exactly? How did she know that this former Imperial weapons, vehicle manufacturer had recent affiliations with Thrawn? I do think she might use the World Between Worlds, not use it in the sense that she would be jumping through the portals and messing with stuff, but maybe using it to see if she could at least, like you said, like the architect in the Matrix, he's got all his TV screens where you can see everything that's going on. She might use it in a similar fashion to try and, as like a Hail Mary pass, to figure out, I need help. I got to find out where this is, because I need to stop this. Or find out. But I think it's going to segue into her discovering where Ezra took Thrawn and why what have they been doing, or where have they been this whole time. And I think that the character played by the late, great Ray Stevenson they pitched him as a guy who's sort of a rogue. Yeah, he has a red lightsaber, kind of dark, whatever, but I think he's somebody who's going to end up knowing more than he lets on about Thrawn and what he's up to, and maybe turn out to be a villain more so than he might like. Because I didn't get the vibe from the trailer that he was a bad guy. I assume he's going to be an antagonist, but I think he's going to be a bigger antagonist. Because as we know, Thrawn is supposed to be the overarching villain for this connected series and eventually the movie. It's not like they're just going to deal with him in one season and throw him away. So I think the Ray Stevenson character is going to end up being a guy who seems like a supporting antagonist at first, but I think you're going to find out that he's the guy who knows a lot more about what's going on than he lets on. And this first season will essentially accomplish filling in the gaps. Like, where's Thrawn and Ezra been? Where's Ahsoka been? What's Thrawn up to? Like, what's going? Like, I think that's kind of where they're gonna orient it. And maybe she will, because we've seen in the trailer, I guess, the hologram of whatever of Ezra.
Mm-hmm.
But is that, how old is that hologram? Is that live? We don't know. So we'll see. I feel that the trailers really haven't given enough to make a prediction as what one way or another as to what it's going to do. Because as far as I know, the show takes place the furthest ahead in the Mandoverse. Like it's not before the other shows or in the middle. It's kind of like the latest thing to come down the pipe. So
Yeah, I think so as well. And there's evidence towards everything that you said. Is we've seen the Purgles, the space whales that are right there, kind of tied to that Thrawn and Ezra disappearance, and where have they been? That's right in that Rebels wheelhouse there. I mean, I don't think that Thrawn and Ezra will have been on Mortis, will have been in the world between worlds and have not aged today. I don't think they'll do that. I think they're going to want to age up Ezra to be the same ages as comparatively to Sabine and Ahsoka. I think they're going to want to do that. So they've been somewhere in physical space as opposed to taken out of the space-time continuum. I think from a lot of everything that we've seen, that Thrawn has been in contact or left some minions in contact, that because his plan is what a lot of these imperial splinter groups are carrying out. Is he the heir to the Empire? I think we've heard, and I don't know if we've heard from a reliable source yet, that the Filoni movie will be called Heir to the Empire. And if that don't tell you, it's all about Thrawn. For those of you who, again, may not be familiar with the EU and other things, that's the title of the original Zahn trilogy that introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn. Go read it. It's great, amazing. If you don't want to read the novels, there's graphic novel adaptations that are also great.
In which case, if he is the heir to the Empire, he probably doesn't know that Palpatine / Snoke is out there as the actual heir to the Empire.
Or is he, because they're retconning the whole deal, or is he the one that's creating the cloning process? Is he the one behind that? There's so many rabbit holes that you can go down with this, and Mortis completely makes it possible. Here's what I want to put out to the universe, which is, please don't make it cheesy. Please don't make it cheesy. Do time travel well, and don't let it be the be-all, end-all solution to anything that we ever wanted to do. And we can it doesn't sound like they're going to retcon like the sequels out of existence, because we've already got the announcement of the Daisy Ridley movie. Because that was my fear before Star Wars Celebration was, oh, now they're going to do it. But don't make it cheesy. Now let me ask this question: is, do you think that the Ahsoka series and their treatment of Mortis is going to have as much mysticism and religious parallels as the original source material, as the Clone Wars and Rebels got away with, because again, they were a cartoon series that nobody was really watching? When this being your flagship Disney Plus property, are they going to dumb that down, or are they going to are they going to stick with it?
I think they're going to stick with it, because even after Lucas left, Filoni is the one who shepherded Mortis in the World Between Worlds portrayal in Rebels, and you could have the same iconography and stuff there, because they didn't have anybody explicitly explaining it in either of those series either. So I think they'll just keep it mystic, but I don't think they're going to treat it as a one-off, like, oh, we're just, as if they're going to just another planet to do something and moving on. It'll be treated, I think, with some reverence or big deal that we're going here.
One can hope. I mean, keep it in they are Jedi, it is a religion. They're and spoilers if you want to hear a whole talk about the Jedi as a religion or Keepers of the Peace. There are other way back episodes of the Unifying Force that we talk about that at length, and to the point that even Jedi is an actual fill out on the census-able religion in real world Earth today. So there's a lot of discussion of that you can go back and check out. But so what do I want to see and what do I think we'll see might be a couple of different things, but we're gonna see Thrawn, we're gonna see Ezra. I hope to goodness that Ahsoka is not one that's messing with the world between worlds. I think we'll stay true to the character of Ezra Bridger, and he'll be anyone who messes in that. It's got to be him. And I don't think that you're completely wrong with it. It could be Thrawn trying to control Mortis. And that's the big bad and the villain.
She was the one who wanted to discourage Ezra from further tampering with the world between worlds and Rebels. So I would expect maybe it's somebody else going in there to try and stop it, or maybe it's going to be one of those things where the villain's going to win, and she's going to have to cheat and go to the world between worlds to retcon it as like a one-time only thing. And whatever she does will cause the entrance portal or whatever to be permanently destroyed, so you can't access it anymore.
But I don't think that'll happen in Ahsoka. I think
Ahsoka, but in the build-up to something down the line.
In the Filoni-verse movie, I think we are very likely going to see, heaven forbid, the Star Wars equivalent of a multiverse. I think that's how you bring all this stuff together. But so anyway, final thoughts? Anything to wrap this one up?
No, I think we got it.
I think we did. Is we had a lot of talk about the beginning of Ahsoka. Like I said, go back, watch that episode, see what we've got here. Get geared up for Ahsoka. We've got more episodes coming. We'll talk about more things. There are more people that are gonna play into this. We didn't even mention Hera Syndulla, who is going to play a large part in this because one of the Rebels crew, who has been cast as Mary Elizabeth Winstead for the Ahsoka show, Daughters of the Galaxy did a feature on her on their July the 5th show. So just last night, as we're recording this, a couple of days ago, as you will see the debut. So go check that out, see more about and learn more about these characters, because I think the biggest thing is whether you have really gone back and rewatched every bit of Star Wars content, which is massive at this point, the more you know and the more of these little bitty things that you've got going in there, the more you're going to get out of the Ahsoka Disney Plus show.
Yeah.
So, friends, until next time, there will be an episode of the Jedi Archives coming up next Sunday, and I honestly think they're going to be talking more Ahsoka, because I think they're talking very specifically the Tales of the Jedi Ahsoka. So join them for some more Summer of Snips. Join Rebels Revisited on Monday. And as always, join the Thursday night watch along, where we were literally going through and putting commentary on episodes of the Clone Wars, episodes of Star Wars Rebels, episodes of The Mandalorian that include, Rosario right there. All your content's right here on the Virtual Cantina Network until we get Ahsoka in August. May the Force be with you.
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Von Olen, the host of Star Wars Rebels Revisited. Join me and my co-host Ashley Brienzo as we do episode watch-alongs, long-form discussions, celebrity interviews, and so much more. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, only on the Virtual Cantina Network.